This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, a Tuesday edition of the show, live in the Matt Blatt Kia Studios on 97.3 ESPN and streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can watch the show here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, the text board is open as well at 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation, 609-403-0973. Coming up in about 20 minutes from now, NBA insider Brandon "Scoop B" Robinson enjoys getting more into the NBA because, let me tell you something. I love Philadelphia fans, but some of you are absolutely, utterly, irrationally insane because the day after Ben Simmons goes for 42 points and Tobias Harris throws up 36 and the rest of the team shoots horribly from the field, not from the foul line, not from three, from the field, people are screaming, you need to trade Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris. So I need to ask somebody who is not in our area, who is not, tied to the team directly, who is not emotionally invested in this team about the Sixers. And that's what Brandon "Scoop B" Robinson is going to do for us coming up a little bit later in the show. Also, we will get to what is going on with the Eagles. Obviously, the Carson Wentz saga continues. What shouldn't they do? There's an article right now on the website at 973ESPN.com. So there was a ranking of all the starting quarterbacks in the NFL. And this gets back to the conversation we had recently about what is the value of Carson Wentz around the NFL. And you can chime in at 609-403-0973 or on the stream as you watch us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So when you think about Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts, quarterbacks, how people view these guys has a lot to do with how they compare to the rest of the league. Remember, your value is what someone says it is, not what you or I personally think it is. It's what the entire league says it is. Well, Carson Wentz, according to these rankings of all the starting quarterbacks, you can see the full list if you head over to 973ESPN.com. Carson Wentz is ranked 35th. Behind him is Sam Darnold, who had a pretty mediocre year. Ahead of him was Gardner Minshew, who eventually got benched. Ahead of Minshew on this list is Drew Lock, who there's reports out of Denver that they're just not happy with him. And behind Darnold, who's behind Wentz, is Taylor Heineke, who might be your starting quarterback next year in Washington. So what you're basically telling me is Carson Wentz is an average quarterback according to these rankings. If you were wondering, on the flip side, Jalen Hurts is 23rd. He's ahead of Daniel Jones and behind Jared Goff. So according to these rankings, Carson Wentz is an average quarterback and Jalen Hurts is an above-average quarterback. And when I talk to you about who's going in the draft this year, after Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, how many of those guys are actually special quarterbacks? There's not many of them. There's not many special quarterbacks out there. So when you think about what Carson Wentz's value is, why teams are interested in him, a big reason why they're interested in him is because of the fact that he has value around the league. He is viewed as, if you go by these rankings, at worst, a top 35 quarterback among all starters in the NFL. Now, we should note that this list has some flaws on it. For example, Ryan Fitzpatrick is listed as 21, and I don't think anybody's expecting Ryan Fitzpatrick to start a full season next year, right? Drew Brees is 19. He's probably retiring. Joe Burrow is coming off a serious injury. Dak Prescott's coming off a serious injury. They might not start week 1 next year. Phillip Rivers is retiring. So there's at least 2 quarterbacks on this list who should be taken off because in terms of 2021 considerations, you can't apply them forward. So by those estimations, Carson Wentz is a starting quarterback in the NFL. You remove those 3 quarterbacks from this list, he is one of the starting 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. Again, if you go by this list, which also has Andy Dalton at 25, he is definitely a backup quarterback in the NFL. Taysom Hill, we don't know what his situation is. Alex Smith, we don't even know he's playing next year. I keep going on and on. Carson Wentz is a starting quarterback in the NFL. The going rate for a starting quarterback does have a specific value. Now, it might not be the value the Eagles want for it. A first-round pick might not be what the Eagles can legitimately get for him. Or maybe it is. You know, a 6 overall pick like the Eagles have is much different than the 26 overall pick. So again, if we're adding context into this conversation, if we're adding some layers into this conversation, it makes things a little bit different. And when you look at how people who are not in this market, who are not emotionally attached to the team, when you look at people who are around the league, how they view a quarterback, that might be different than how you or I view that quarterback. You or I may not like a said player. You or I may not think a certain player has value. But at the end of the day, somebody does, or he would have been drafted 2nd overall, and teams wouldn't call about trading for him. There is a little bit of irony that the guy right next to him on this list is Sam Darnold. Is it not? I've been telling you guys for a few days now. Sam Darnold is a guy you have to really think about when it comes to the Wentz conversation. Because both quarterbacks did not have great years last year. You could argue that Wentz had a worse year than Darnold. Fine. I'm not going to sit here and nitpick about that. But there is something to be said about the fact that both of them are trade pieces out there. Both of them are in the conversation. And I think if you break it all down, Carson Wentz is starting somewhere next year. It might not be in the Eagles uniform, and it behooves the Eagles to get as much value as humanly possible for Carson Wentz at the end of the day. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Again, you can check out the full list of all the quarterbacks ranked over at 97.3 ESPN.com. It's an NFL.com ranking of quarterbacks. You can check it out on the website. Also, we are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can watch the show. The Joe Show chimes in at the beginning of the show. The Joe Show says, hey, Josh, what are your expectations for the Eagles this year? Do you see them having a better record with Hurts or drafting a quarterback to be the starter? Also, would that cause problems by getting a quarterback? Well, let's get one question at a time, Joe. You got a lot of questions here. First of all, my expectations for the Eagles are purely dependent on what they do this offseason. As of right now, I think if they're healthy next year, they're an 8-8, 9-17. If that offensive line is healthy, you can't tell me they're going to only win a handful of games next year. You saw that the Chiefs, what they looked like with a horrible offensive line in the Super Bowl. And the Chiefs played the majority of the year without their starting guard, who was in Canada being a doctor. They lost other offensive linemen throughout the year, and they still got to the big game. You could be a winning team as long as you have the majority of your team healthy. But last year, the Eagles, they just were not healthy. Don't lose sight of that. Furthermore, let's be realistic. You ask about they have a better record with Hurts or drafting a quarterback. The answer has to be Hurts because you're never better off with a rookie quarterback unless your current quarterback is just absolute and utterly underwhelming and can't play in the NFL at a high level. Jalen Hurts already has a year in the NFL. He puts in the work. He's a hard worker. He showed you flashes of say he could be something. Unless you're getting your hands on Trevor Lawrence, I don't see a scenario where you would take any of the rookie quarterbacks in any scenario over Hurts. To me, Trey Lance is a massive project. Mac Jones' potential is to be better than Kirk Cousins. Not really getting you too excited, right? I think Justin Fields has a lot of potential, but I think that he's one of those guys who you got to be patient with. And I don't know if Philadelphia is willing to be patient with anybody right now at this point in time with any of the teams, considering what I see on social media. When you think about the other rookie quarterbacks, Zach Wilson, injury-prone, questionable in big games. And I mentioned Trey Lance. He's a full-blown project. Kyle Trask. I think Kyle Trask is a system quarterback. I think Kyle Trask is as good as the team that he's on. If he's on a good team, he's good. If he's on a bad team, he's bad. So, in my opinion, if you want to win next year, Jalen Hurts has to be your quarterback. You got to build around him. You got to develop with him. The question is are people going to be patient enough with that quarterback to let him develop? Those are obviously two different conversations. 609-403-0973. Also, I mentioned we are going to get to the Sixers because last night, Ben Simmons scores 42 points. He almost had a triple-double last night. Tobias Harris scored 36. But you want to know why they lost to the Jazz last night? They lost to the Jazz because the rest of the team went 18 for 44 on field goal attempts. The rest of the team, not three-pointers, not free throws, all shots from the field, 40.9%. Meanwhile, the Jazz hit 18 threes. But yet I see people screaming, trade Ben Simmons, trade Tobias Harris today. Or, well, since the last 24 hours since the game. I got to be honest with you guys. Some of you Sixer fans perplex me. It's almost like you guys don't even watch basketball. Because you can't tell me in any reality where a guy plays that well. And I'm not saying Ben Simmons is great. I'm not saying he's a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying he's legendary. I'm just saying that maybe Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris are just not as bad as people like to say they are. Maybe Ben Simmons is not as much of a dumpster fire as people have tried to say he is. And Tobias Harris, you know, that guy who texted the Sports Bench earlier is not the first person I see mentioned to betray Tobias Harris for Blake Griffin. Do you know what Blake Griffin's shooting from the field this year? 36% on all field goal attempts. You know what Tobias Harris shooting? Over 52%. And I'm sorry, you don't want Tobias Harris, but you want Blake Griffin. Listen, whatever you're on, please pass it along. Because I think we all would benefit from it. Because apparently some people are living in an alternate reality that I am completely unaware of. You literally had two guys by themselves try to carry a team back into a game against the team with the best record in the NBA. Without their MVP candidate on the floor, no Joel Embiid last night. They try to do it all by themselves. But yet, people still hate Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris. I just don't understand it. Again, I'm not saying that either of those guys are legends or Hall of Famers. What I'm saying is, at some point, we got to at least give these guys credit. 609-403-0973. Got Rich in the Villas chiming in on the text board. I'll pop it up on the screen here in front of me. Rich says, if your primary ball handler can't pull up from 15 feet and beyond, he's a liability. Ben Simmons is a great player. I'm not denying it. However, until he adds to his game, he will never reach elite status. Listen, I agree with you, and I don't think he is elite. But at some point, guys, at some point, it can't just be me, Mike Gill, and Hunter Brody, and the people who cover this team and cover the NBA calling out the dude who says, trade Ben Simmons for a bag of basketballs. Or the person who says, trade Tobias Harris for Blake Griffin. At some point, nobody is saying that these guys are elite. But what we're saying is, you realize if you watch the NBA what you're getting from these guys compared to other teams. When the Clippers win their game last night, without Kawhi, without PG-13, and without 4 of their 5 starters at the Los Angeles Clippers, and Marcus Morris goes off, they won the game. You had 2 of your best players on the court last night, and you lost the game. But people want to blame Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris. The irrationality is incredible. We'll get to more of your text messages throughout the show at 609-403-0973. Also, all of you watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, 973 ESPN on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can watch the show live here in the Matt Black Kia Studios on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, don't forget my FanDuel Sportsbook pick of the night coming up in about 30 minutes from now. But joining us next, NBA insider Brandon "Scoop B" Robinson. How does the rest of the league view Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris? Get his perspective on the latest trade rumors and more right here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Sea City, and live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show live. 97.3 ESPN.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. It is Game Night. No Sixers game tonight, but they did play last night. To get more into the perspective on the 76ers and more, joining me right now on the Boardwalk Hotline and live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, the one, the only, Brandon "Scoop B" Robinson, NBA insider. Expertise joins us here on 97.3 ESPN. My friend, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, except for these crazy people out here, which I got to ask you about. So, you are not emotionally attached to the Sixers. You are not somebody who's grown up as a fan your whole life or anything like that. So, I got to know from you, what is the real perspective on guys like Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris? Because if you ask the random Joe Schmo down here who's irrational, trade Ben Simmons for a bag of basketballs and trade Tobias Harris for Blake Griffin. That's what they're going to tell you. So I need to know from you, what is the real perspective from people who actually cover the league and who are objective about those two players?
Well, first of all, no, I didn't grow up a Sixers fan. I didn't grow up in the area, but I am a proud alum of Eastern University on the main line, so I know how you guys think. 3-game losing streak. You're mad. So I think at the end of the day, losing that game to the Utah Jazz the other night, when you had not Donovan Mitchell scoring 40 points in a game, frustrated. Matisse Thybulle was the defensive assignment and kind of failed on that end, but I don't think it's time to kind of give up on the 76ers. I think the objective perspective of the Philadelphia 76ers is they're a top 3 team in the NBA's Eastern Conference. I mean, I think everybody is ready to give the Brooklyn Nets the Eastern Conference crown, and it doesn't work like that. They got James Harden, they got Kyrie, they're still missing a center. When you look at the 76ers, on the other hand, they've got a full deck of cards. I mean, not only do you have Ben Simmons, not only do you have Joel Embiid, you have Tobias Harris. You have a lineup where you have Seth Curry. I think Seth Curry was the most underrated addition this offseason. In addition to that, you have Dwight Howard, who I think is playing that mentor role. I've said this on your show before. The mentor role, he is everything that we thought Al Horford would be. And it's still very early in the season, but even from the bench perspective, Shake Milton, you've got some pieces that you're not totally just dependent on the two-headed monster of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. And I think that's the difference between this year and last year. I think the season before last, they should have went to the finals. I mean, they were a last second shot away from going to the finals and potentially winning a championship against the hobbled Golden State Warriors. So here we are now, man. I wouldn't give up on the Sixers just yet. They're still in first place in the Eastern Conference. I think you've trusted the process long enough that you're a little spoiled right now.
Let's touch on Tobias Harris a little bit more, because he's a guy that I feel like all people know is, for the people who don't like him, okay? For people like me, I'm sitting here saying he should be an all-star. I'm voting for every time I can get, because I think this guy is more than just a great player. I think he's a great human being. But why is it that people who are basketball fans, whether Sixer or basketball fans in general, why are they so attached to the contract? It's like, do people realize how much money Rudy Gobert's making, for goodness sake?
I think because you gave up essentially Jimmy Butler and JJ Redick for Tobias Harris in theory in free agency. I think it was $142 million contract, or 124, somewhere along that line.
180.
What'd you say?
180.
Okay. But this is a guy who has played under Doc Rivers before and is doing well. I mean, just taking a cursory look at the stats. Through 25 games this season, is averaging 20.7 points and 7.4 total rebounds per game this season for the 76ers under Doc Rivers, who he played for as a member of the Clippers. I think Brett Brown and his system didn't really benefit him the right way. But here's the thing. Even during times where Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid were hurt last year, Tobias stepped up. I sat down with Tobias last spring. And we talked about winning. And he said essentially his focus as a leader on this team is to win a championship. His focus is to lead these troops to victory. And they didn't really do that in the bubble. They're doing it early in the season. You know, that win against the Lakers really sold me on Tobias early in the season. But I just think everybody is so enamored with Joel and Ben. The Sixers actually have a big three.
Brandon Scoopy Robinson, NBA insider, joining me here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on 97.3 ESP. You can follow me on Twitter at ScoopB on Twitter and Instagram for the full Brandon Scoopy Robinson experience. So last night you have Ben Simmons scores 42, Tobias scores 36. The rest of the team shot 40.9% from the field. So I know no Joel Embiid last night. That was a part of it. But what do you think this team needs at this point? A lot of people say maybe a guard off the bench, another power forward coming out, a stretch four coming off the bench. In your eyes, what do you think is a legitimately achievable piece for this team to add that would make them better?
Why not go after Blake Griffin if he gets a buyout?
Now,
he has a relationship with Doc.
Really quick, the caveat for you would be the buyout, correct? Because you don't want that full contract on your books.
Yes, the buyout. If there's a buyout, you don't make a prudent move like that without the buyout. I know that the odds, Vegas has Miami as a front runner in that sweepstakes, assuming there's a trade. From everything that I've heard, Detroit is looking for a buyout, and if that happens, that's a lot of money he's leaving on the table. He's kind of in a precarious situation that Chris Paul was in a couple of seasons ago. Do you take a buyout and then sign with the Lakers to win a championship, or do you continue to get your money? Because this is your last big payday. And I think Blake is in a similar situation. So I think, realistically, I think there are some people who are free agents. You just saw Brooklyn nab of Andre Roberson. I believe his sister actually dates Spencer Dinwiddie, so there was a home field advantage there. But there are people who are free agents, and I think Dedmon as a big man is still somebody who's available. I know he played for the Hawks and he played for the San Antonio Spurs. But there are some options out there in free agency. I'm going to always ride for Jamal Crawford. He's a free agent. So there's pieces out there. It's just, the right fit. Alan Crabb is another guy who can shoot at a high clip. He's a free agent. So, there's options out there. I think the Sixers, in my opinion, maybe need some insurance policy at the shooting guard position because I think that they're so swingman dominant. They need a solid two guard. If JJ Redick becomes available somehow at the trade deadline, I know that he wants to settle in the East Coast team if there's a move. So there's a lot of different segmented pieces there, but I don't think the Sixers need too much. I think they're solid.
Now, we always talk about as well when it comes to this team. I got to ask you, because I've heard this conversation as well. There's people out there who believe Ben and Joel can't win a championship together. What is your perspective on that, and what have you heard from people that you've talked to around the league about that?
I think I've heard anything from this is the modern day Shaq and Penny, that Ben Simmons needs his own team, and that Joel needs his own team, to those guys can coexist. I think it just depends on the weather. And as a Northeasterner, as I am, as such as yourself, opinions can change like the weather. It can be warm one day, it can be cold the next day. And sometimes there's snow in Dallas and Houston. So with that being said, I think you have to tune out the noise and just continue to progress. Like, realistically, the Sixers have a chance to make it to the finals. I don't think that you can just look at Brooklyn and say they're a complete product. Just like I think that it is understated how much of an underdog the Miami Heat are, because they've dealt with so many injuries, and I think they're going to come back and rack up some wins. I think it's still very early in the season, and this goes for not just taking a whole look at the league or taking a look at the Sixers. This goes for the whole league. When you look at the NBA at large, we're talking about an NBA that had no preseason, no summer league, minimal training camp, and you're just throwing them to the Wolves and playing a 72-game season, and then you're fitting an all-star game that has a three-point shootout at the beginning, a game, and then a slam dunk contest at halftime, and then the second half of the game. That's a lot. And I think that the NBA and players at large have done a lot in a short window and a shortened, off season coming from the bubble. There's just a lot there, Josh. And I think that the Sixers are doing well, all things considered. Remind you, they're still in first place.
Yeah.
So when you look at the Sixers, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, it's the concept, you give somebody a bag of money and they tell you it's too heavy.
Hey, I'll take it.
He is Brandon Scoop B Robinson. Scoop B Radio is the podcast, at Scoop B on Twitter, joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESP, and also Scoop B on Instagram for the full Scoop B experience. You mentioned the All-Star game. I got to ask you about that. I feel like we've been getting mixed messages about the situation. On one hand, the reports are, the NBA, the players, they're working together on this. But then you get guys like LeBron and Giannis coming out there and saying what they're saying. What is the real, shall I call it, scoop on the NBA All-Star game situation?
A lot of guys don't want to play. They don't want to travel. They want to use that time to spend time with their families, and they're frustrated. Some are more vocal than others. I know players who didn't even want to play this season, like from the beginning. What Karl Anthony Towns, for example, said when he had that 20-minute press conference the other day when he returned from resting from COVID. Karl didn't even want to play this season. He lost his mother. He had a mini car accident. He's lost a ton of people to COVID. His dad recovered from COVID. His mom, not so blessed, and God rest Jackie Cruz's soul. There are other people in his family that have dealt with that. So that's a small microcosm to about 10 other people that I know that I have either had direct conversation or to agents and more that had no interest in playing this season. And so when you look at the All-Star game, a lot of players feel as though there is a level of you care more about the money than you do the actual well-being of others. And it kind of ties along the lines of people or getting mad at players for taking their brands or their futures in their hands and how they look at themselves as businesses, kind of the rant that you saw with Draymond Green last night and in real time. Like you're dealing with players who know their worth and owners who struggle with guys who are aware of their worth. And you're mashing an all-star game in Atlanta who seemingly is unlike all the other 49 states in the U.S. that seemingly have low numbers as it relates to COVID. And you're mashing all those guys into one arena with or without fans for one big performance. and a lot of guys are not with it. They're frustrated and want to get through the season. You got a lot of guys who are not only very not wanting to play in the All-Star game, but are very finicky about this vaccine. Not necessary, but more on the lines of like, what are the long-term effects of this? You saw Jason talking today about the effects of COVID and returning, and his breathing and all that other stuff. There's a lot of things we just don't know. And a lot of guys, the unknown is a little scary to them.
He's Braden Scoop B Robinson. Follow him on Twitter for all your NBA insight and analysis at Scoop B on Twitter and Instagram. And don't forget the Scoop B Radio podcast. That's been going hot for many years now. As all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. I appreciate you jumping on, my friend.
Thank you for the opportunity to be myself, sir.
Absolutely. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, text board is up. We'll get back to your text at 609-403-0973. Also, live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We get your comments there up on the screen. We'll get to them in just a bit. So the Joe Show, a.k.a. Eagles88, and more, as well as Dan from Tuckerton, Dan and EHT. We got a lot of your comments to get to in just a little bit of time here on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. And again, live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Just follow 97.3 ESPN.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN, of course, live in the Matt Black Kia studios on 97.3 ESPN. That's Matt Black Kia, located in the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. They want to get you approved today. For more information, visit them online at mattblackkia.com. Get to your comments now. Eagles, Sixers, and more here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget my FanDuel Sportsbook pick of the night coming at you in about 8 minutes from now. Roughly 8 minutes from now. So we'll get to the FanDuel Sportsbook pick of the night. Don't forget, FanDuel Sportsbook, your home for same-game parlays. Don't forget, you get same-game parlay insurance and a risk-free bet up to $1,000 when you use my promo code Hennig at sign-up. That's Hennig when you sign up at FanDuel Sportsbook. So we'll get to the text board. We're going to mix them up. Text board, Facebook, YouTube. We're going to mix you guys all up into a bundle here. I did want to get the Dan from Tuckerton. He sent this in before the last break. Dan from Tuckerton listening and texted in 609-403-0973. Pop on the screen here if you guys are watching. Dan says, Bradley Beal has lost something in the last 10 games when he scored 40 or more. Yet people praise, they don't bash him. Why are people doing Ben dirty like that? It takes a team to win. Well, they're doing Ben dirty, folks. Dan from Tuckerton is because folks out there think that if you don't play a certain style of basketball, you're a bum, you're stupid, you're an idiot, you can't do certain things. And people pick and choose the players they want to be judgmental of. People don't want to be objective all the time. People, as a general principle, they want to be subjective. They want to sit there and pick and choose who their favorites are. So that's why people are being more critical of Ben than Bradley Beal. And look, I think Bradley Beal is an all-star. He's had an amazing season. I think that he's a great player. And I think if the Sixers found a way to get him, I think a lot of people would be happy. That doesn't mean that Ben Simmons didn't score 42 points last night. That doesn't mean that Ben Simmons is a bad player. That doesn't mean that Ben doesn't know what he's doing. Ben scored 42 points last night. He's not a bum. People, they want to act like he is. It is what it is. That's why that happens. 609-403-0973. The anonymous Blake Griffin defender texted in a little bit earlier at 609-403-0973. He says, Blake Griffin is an alpha male this team needs. Game on the line, shot clock winding down. He's going to put it in the basket. You know what Tobias is going to do? Dribble until the shot clock goes to 4 seconds and then take a bad shot. Well, first of all, Texter, that's not what happened in the Lakers game. He actually bailed the Sixers out in the Lakers game and won them the game. Listen, Blake Griffin was a great player for a very long time. But when you're shooting 36%, let me get the exact number here. I wrote it all down earlier. Blake Griffin compared to Tobias Harris. Let's go by the numbers here. Blake Griffin is averaging The lowest points per game of his career at 12.3, and his second fewest rebounds of his career at 5.2 rebounds per game this year. Blake Griffin is scoring 12.3 points per game, while Tobias is scoring 20.7 points per game. Blake has 5.2 rebounds per game. Tobias has 7.4 rebounds per game. Blake is shooting 36.5% on field goal attempts, while Tobias is shooting 52.2% on field goal attempts. So if you believe, after all of that information, that Blake Griffin is a better player than Tobias Harris, I can't help you. I can't help you because you're being irrational. You're being biased. You probably have a predisposed opinion against Tobias Harris or a bias for a long time for Blake Griffin. It's my job to speak the truth. And if you don't like the truth hurts. I'm not even fully sure if Blake Griffin is that much of an alpha. Most players in the NBA are betas anyway. You're going to tell me that Blake Griffin scoring 12.3 points per game and 5.2 rebounds is an alpha? Come on. You're either completely irrational, Texter, or you're a troll. I don't know what to tell you. A couple comments on here. We'll get back to text board at 609-403-0973. On Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, we are streaming the show. You can watch it, 973 ESPN. AK Eagles 88 says, watching the show on YouTube, I don't understand the drafting Fields talk. To me, Fields and Hurts are the same quarterback, and drafting Fields means Hurts won't start. I can't see Hurts starting if the Eagles take Fields at 6. Please explain. Sure. Well, first of all, I think people just don't like Hurts. There are some people who just don't like Hurts. They think that the sample size that he put out was not enough for them to determine if he should be the starting quarterback. And they believe, AK Eagles 88, that the Eagles, Philadelphia Eagles, need to bring in another quarterback to compete with Hurts for the job. I tend to agree with you. I think that Hurts and Fields are very similar players. They both have similar arm strength, in my opinion. They both have similar athletic qualities, although Hurts is probably the stronger athlete. He's the more durable athlete compared to Fields. Not that Fields is injury prone or anything. I just think that the way Hurts' body is built. Remember, Hurts does powerlifting. You're a pretty strong you-know-what if you're a power lifter, okay? To do the squatting and the deadlifting that Jalen Hurts does during the offseason, it is a sign of the way his body is constructed. He can take a hit. He can dish out a little punishment. He's not going to be broken in half easily. Justin Fields is a little leaner. So being a leaner player does cause problems at times. And I think that that's part of the reason why I'm concerned about Devonta Smith of Alabama. The dude wouldn't weigh in at the Senior Bowl. And that's concerned evaluators of the draft. They're looking at Smith and saying, why won't you weigh in? Why won't you tell us how much you weigh? That's a problem for them. I think Fields compared to Hurts is a similar conversation. Fields is a phenomenal athlete, but he is leaner than Hurts is. Hurts is built like an NFL quarterback physically. He's thick. Guys like Russell Wilson, guys like Dak Prescott, guys like Ben Roethlisberger, Matthew Stafford. You go down the list. The majority of NFL quarterbacks are thicker build, so they can take a hit. Tom Brady doesn't look that thick, but he's built very, very, very sturdy, all right? I don't know if Fields is NFL physically ready to take a hit yet. That's just my opinion. Good question, though. AK Eagles 88. More comments on Facebook and YouTube. Watch the show on 97.3 ESPN. The Joe Show says some fans need to stop focusing on the name of players and look at the actual season stats. Well, that's the problem, Joe Show. People come up with opinions based on the information that supports their opinion. You know, I was told a very long time ago by somebody who knows a lot more than me, there are facts and there are true facts. The facts are the information that you look for to support your argument. The true facts are the information that you find that you develop your side of the argument based on. And the problem is a lot of fans, they go out and find facts to support their argument. They don't go actually and do research or collect information and then develop an opinion off of that. That's part of the reason why that happens, Joe Show. You're right, though. 609-403-0973 is the text board. We got Dan from EHT. Let's pull him up on the screen so you guys can see Dan from EHT's comment on the text board. Just got to hit the paste button. A little behind-the-scenes information that you didn't need to know, but there you go. Dan from EHT says, I agree, Josh. Tobias is a really good third guy for the Sixers. I am not biased on Tobias. Well, Dan, listen, you try to be objective. I always have given you credit for that. Even when you and I disagree about things, Dan EHT, you've always tried to be objective. And I think that's a credit to you. You know, we don't have to agree all the time for us to have a good, healthy conversation. And I think that's a big deal in this stuff. You know, people get so angry on Twitter and social media about some of this stuff. They can't have a conversation. And I think that, listen, as Dan EHT says, he thinks that part of the Sixers' problem has nothing to do with Ben and Joel. Here's the other part of what Dan EHT said, what he texted in at 609-403-09, something popping up for you guys watching on the YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter feeds. He says, no way. Joe, Ben, and Harris are a really good three. It's the role players that's the Sixers' problem. Curry, Green, and Korkmaz are terrible, says Dan EHT. Well, that's the interesting thing, Dan. The Sixers are in a very interesting predicament, right? They're in this predicament that they have talent, but they don't have all the supporting pieces. I mentioned it earlier. When your supporting cast goes out there and they can't get the job done to help your quarterback, that's a sad situation. It's a very sad situation. You have Ben Simmons for 42, Tobias Harris for 36, but yet nobody else stepped up. That's a bad, bad situation. Oh, my goodness. Paul watching on YouTube. I have to disagree with you, Paul. That's why I got to pull you up. First of all, Paul's a good man for putting his name on the comment. Paul K says on YouTube, grab a quarterback while there's a lot of talent in this draft at quarterback. Yeah, but see, you're looking at it from just a perspective on who the quarterback is. You're not looking at the fact the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round because Howie Roseman said they couldn't pass up on the quarterback like they did years ago with Russell Wilson. See, I like what Jersey P says here on YouTube here. Jersey P says, the Eagles need more better players who are going to throw the ball to. So I get on board with that. See, Tom Brady got to the Super Bowl after throwing 3 interceptions. The Bucs defense shut down Patrick Mahomes. So you need players around your quarterback. It doesn't matter if it's Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts, or whoever. You need the guy to have someone to throw to. And you know what? If you're someone who looks at the Eagles and says, I don't believe in Jalen Reagor, I don't believe in Greg Ward, I don't believe in John Hightower, I don't believe in Travis Fulgham, Deontay Burnett, Dallas Goedert, enough for me to feel comfortable, then Jersey P is right. At some point, you got to look at the Eagles and say, what's drafting a quarterback going to do? Probably going to do a lot of nothing. All right, before we get out of here, time for the FanDuel Sportsbook pick of the night. Again, use my promo code Hennig for FanDuel Sportsbook. Same game parlay insurance, your first same game parlay, 3 legs or more. It will protect if you lose 1 leg on the parlay. Also, your first risk-free bet up to $1,000. See full terms and conditions at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Tonight, we're going to go with the Nets. The Nets have hit the over in 8 of the last 10 games and 22 of the 30 games this season. Nets at the Suns, no Kyrie Irving, doesn't matter. Give me the over 227 because the Nets don't play defense. And with no Kyrie, someone has to score. So give me Nets at Suns over 227. 2 teams don't play much defense. And Joe Harris over 15.5 points on the game tonight. That's your FanDuel Sportsbook pick of the night. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night. I'll catch you tomorrow.